Are Nate Oates and Alabama doing what any other college basketball program would do if they could bring back a player the caliber of Charles Bediako? Or are they hastening the end of college basketball as we know it? We dive into the biggest controversy in the sport right now, today on ScarboKnows. Is this what we want college basketball to be? There you see Alabama's Charles Bediako, former Alabama player and current Alabama player. After 2.5 years in the pro ranks in the G League, he apparently is going to be playing basketball again for Alabama 3 years after his last game in the 2023 Sweet 16 on Saturday night against Tennessee. And the entire college basketball world is on fire discussing this subject. Is it the right thing to do? What are the repercussions? What should the NCAA do? We're going to discuss all of it today here on ScarboKnows. Of course, I am Scarbo, a.k.a. Kevin Skarbinski. Thank you for joining us here on the Sidelines.live network with extraordinary executive producer Brendan Martin. We hope you'll check out all the great shows on the network. I want to say thank you to them. Thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services, Birmingham's financial services firm since 1992. The Rice family, they're good friends of mine. They'll take great care of you. Check out the QR code on the screen. We'll hear more from them later in the show. So away we go as we dive into what is happening with Alabama basketball in the middle of the season as they're trying to add a rather prominent piece to the roster. One Charles Bediako. Let's look at who is Charles Bediako. Let's look at the Bediako file and who is this individual that all this controversy is swirling around. He's a 7-foot, 225-pound center. He's going to be 24 years old in March. He's from Ontario, Canada. Played his high school ball at IMG Academy. He played 2 seasons at Alabama, 2021-2022 and 2022-2023, where his numbers were not big. 6.6 points a game, 5.2 rebounds a game, 1.7 blocks a game. But he was a key rim protector, particularly on that 2023 Alabama team that won the SEC regular season championship with Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney and Jaden Bradley, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They won the SEC tournament. They were the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they got upset in the Sweet 16 by San Diego State. So that it appeared at the time, was the end of Charles Bediako's college basketball career. He declared for the NBA draft in 2023. He kept his name in the draft, which, according to NCAA rules, we'll get into this more later, makes you ineligible to play college basketball. He was not drafted. He has played the last 2.5 years in the G League, where he's averaged a little less than 8.5 points a game, 8 rebounds a game, and about 1 block per game. And he played last Saturday night in Birmingham for the Motor City Cruise as they beat the Birmingham Squadron here at Legacy Arena. He played about 6 minutes, had 4 points, 3 rebounds. So if this continues on this path, he will go in 1 week from playing in the G League in Birmingham to playing in the SEC in Tuscaloosa for Alabama Saturday night against Tennessee. So that's the through line of the story. Let's look at the timeline of what has been happening behind the scenes and now has gone very, very public. So Charles enrolled for Alabama's spring semester. Smart move on his part. You do still, until further notice, until some other court strikes it down, have to be enrolled as a college student to play college sports. Now, the rigor of the classes, the frequency of the classes, the location of the classes, in person or online, those are all variables, but you do still have to be a college student. So as he enrolled, Alabama was appealing to the NCAA to reinstate him as a college athlete. And the NCAA, predictably, accurately in the eyes of many, denied that appeal. So Charles Bediako did what so many athletes are doing. He sued the NCAA to regain his eligibility. And just this week, a Tuscaloosa court, shocker, granted Bediako a temporary restraining order, and the TRO says he is eligible to play Saturday night against Tennessee in a rather big SEC game. And the court has scheduled a hearing on Bediako's request for a preliminary injunction, which would allow him to continue playing beyond Saturday. And that hearing will take place next Tuesday morning, January 27th, in that same Tuscaloosa courtroom. Let's examine the temporary restraining order in a little more detail, because there are some key phrases in here. One phrase in particular is going to jump out at you, because as the rest of college basketball has begun reaching for its smelling salts, and we're going to get into some of the reaction a little later in the show, everyone is up in arms, and everyone is suggesting what the NCAA should do to punish Alabama, to not let this stand, to not allow Alabama to benefit from bringing back a guy who's played the last 2 years in the G League, hasn't played college basketball in 3 years, and you're going to add him to your roster, which no one would deny is going to make Alabama a better basketball team. You put Charles Bediako on this roster, you integrate him into that rotation, and all of a sudden, Alabama has an elite rim protector, a strong rebounder, a superior outlet passer that fits perfectly into the way Nate Oates wants to play. They want to run. They want to get up and down. They want to get shots early in the shot clock. They want to shoot either at the rim or from the three-point line. And Bediako, as he demonstrated in his 2 years at Alabama previously, he's really good in that role. He's a role player. Let's not get it confused. He's not a star. He's not going to dominate games. He's not going to go for 20 and 15. That's not who he is. That's not what he does. But he will make Alabama a much better basketball team with him on the floor. In fact, and some of you may scoff, he makes Alabama a Final Four contender if he plays out the rest of the season, and he plays at the level that he did 3 years ago. And obviously, he's older. He's more mature. I'm going to guess he's a little stronger than he was when he played in Tuscaloosa the last time. So all of a sudden, whereas right now it looks like Florida and Texas A&M are the two best teams in the SEC, they're tied atop the standings at 5-1. Alabama's at 3-2. All of a sudden, now you have to think of Alabama as maybe the best team in the SEC, or at least on the short list. LeBaron Philon having an outstanding year. Aiden Holloway, their backcourt is second to none. Aiden Sherrill is starting to come on in the post. And you add Bediako to the mix, and watch out. Watch out when Alabama goes to Florida in a week or two. Watch out when Alabama plays Tennessee on Saturday, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a very, very big deal, which is why so many people across the college basketball landscape are pushing back on the very idea that Alabama could be allowed to do this. And they're already concocting ways that the NCAA should respond. But there's a problem with that. Let's look at the temporary restraining order. There is one particular phrase, one particular paragraph, paragraph 3, that would seem to circumvent these suggestions about punishing Alabama. And this was the order issued by Tuscaloosa County Circuit Court Judge James H. Roberts, Jr. And paragraph 3 says this: the defendant, National Collegiate Athletic Association, is further restrained from threatening, imposing, attempting to impose, suggesting, or implying any penalties or sanctions on Mr. Bediako or the University of Alabama or its coaches or other student athletes as a result of Mr. Bediako's participation in Division I athletics competition. Let me break that down for you. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV. I like to think in another life, I was an attorney. I was Perry Mason. I was Matlock with a different accent. I was the legal eagle who came in and saved the day for the downtrodden, the poor, the huddled masses. That's as opposed to the other life when I was a New York cab driver. If you've ever seen me drive, you know what I'm talking about. But I understand this in this way. All these suggestions that you should ban Alabama from the NCAA tournament or simply not count the games that Bediako plays in on Alabama's resume when the selection committee meets in March to decide the at-large teams for the NCAA tournament, they just don't count those games. They work against Alabama's resume. You keep Alabama out of the NCAA tournament. That would be a direct violation of a court order. I don't think the NCAA wants to go down that path because they would be sued even deeper into oblivion than they've already been sued if they were to attempt that maneuver. And might I mention, Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletics director, is a member of the NCAA selection committee. Now, of course, he cannot be in the room when the committee is discussing Alabama's resume, its worthiness for getting an at-large bid. That's if they don't win the SEC tournament to earn the automatic bid from the conference. So Byrne can't be in the room. However, Byrne's in the room all weekend, and it's a long weekend. There will be, if this plays out this way and Bediako gets to play the rest of the season, there will be some spirited conversations, I imagine, in that committee room between Byrne and the others. But if Alabama follows the law, if the NCAA follows the law, they cannot, the way I read it, legally keep Alabama out of the NCAA tournament simply because they played Charles Bediako. I think it's very, very important. Now, just because you can play Charles Bediako because a Tuscaloosa County Circuit Court judge said you could doesn't mean you have to, right? That's an Alabama decision. So what is Alabama going to do on Saturday? Saturday evening, they're playing a huge game against Tennessee. Alabama hasn't said directly what it plans to do, but it gave us a pretty good hint. Let's look at a statement that Alabama released after the temporary restraining order came out of that Tuscaloosa courtroom. Statement from the University of Alabama on Charles Bediako. The University of Alabama supports Charles and his ongoing efforts to be reinstated for competition while he works to complete his degree. Nasty work there in that last phrase. While he works to complete his degree. Adding in the academic element to this is almost as if Alabama's saying, shame on you people. Every one of you that doesn't want him to play, you're suggesting that we deny this young man his opportunity to come back to school and get a degree, which of course is nonsense. No one's saying that. You can go back and get your degree. A lot of professional athletes do that without returning to college athletics. Cam Newton did it while he was winning an MVP with the Carolina Panthers in the NFL. He was taking classes back at Auburn and completed his sociology degree there. He didn't ask for another season to go back and play for the Tigers, luckily for the rest of the SEC and college football. So that's a little disingenuous, but it certainly suggests that Alabama is in full support of what Charles Bediako is doing and his legal team, and that now that they've been given the opportunity to play him, that they will do exactly that on Saturday night. And several people have reported, including Nick Kelly from AL.com, according to their sources, that Alabama will play Charles Bediako on Saturday night. How many minutes? We don't know. What kind of game shape is he in? Well, he was playing in the G League a week ago here in Birmingham. So I don't think it's a great stretch to suggest that he's in game shape to be able to play 7 days later 60 miles down the interstate in Tuscaloosa. So it does appear that Alabama plans to play him. Now, we should note also the temporary restraining order is temporary. It says therein that it lasts for 10 days. However, the judge has set a hearing, as we mentioned earlier, for Tuesday, January 27th, on Bediako's request for an injunction. And the injunction essentially would allow him to play out the rest of the season until we can have a full trial, I suppose, between Bediako and his legal team and the NCAA and its legal team to resolve this issue. But we know how those things can drag out. You can get in a courtroom pretty quickly, especially a friendly courtroom in the city of an SEC university. But trials take longer. So if he is granted the injunction on Tuesday, you can pretty much bet he will be eligible for the rest of the season, and Alabama will play him for the rest of the season, and the rest of college basketball will be running around with his hair on fire, looking for every way possible to keep Alabama from benefiting from adding a former college player 3 years after his last game, after he's played 2.5 years in the G League. It's crazy, isn't it? What are we even doing here? And as you can imagine, the reaction from across the college basketball universe has been swift and furious. We've heard from so many people. Let's look at some of that reaction. Of course, naturally, the NCAA is going to oppose the ruling. They issued a statement. This is a condensation of what they said. This is really the bottom line of what they said. This is exactly why Congress must step in and empower college sports to enforce our eligibility standards. To that I say, amen, brother. If the NCAA cannot even set its own standards for who is able to play college sports, the game is over. College sports is dead. We might as well just let you play as many years as you want in college and never go on to the pros, or go to the pros, fail there, come back and play for maybe your former school, maybe another school, whoever's going to pay you the most NIL. But college sports as we know it will die. It will be dead, buried, and gone if the NCAA is not able to set its own eligibility standards and then enforce them. Now, here's an interesting twist in terms of reaction. And there seems to be a concerted effort. I don't know if there was some super secret Zoom call among athletic directors and coaches and commentators, but a common thread has emerged. Look at what UConn athletics director David Benedict said. And by the way, David Benedict used to work at Auburn. Do with that what you will. It doesn't mean the games need to count toward the NCAA tournament, meaning the games that Bediako plays in. Otherwise, throw away the rule book and set it on fire. I do love the colorful nature of that quote. And then last night, Kentucky coach Mark Pope, after Kentucky beat Texas, he wasn't even asked about the Charles Bediako situation, but he felt compelled to offer his opinion. And again, a condensation of what he said. The one stopgap right now is kind of a last stand. The NCAA does get to decide who gets to go to the NCAA tournament. Do you see the pattern developing? Seth Greenberg, former coach, now an ESPN talking head, who the next time he says something negative about another coach will be the first. He is on social media pushing the same idea. Sure, go ahead. Let Bediako play. And then when the selection committee gets in the room, they can decide, okay, we don't think that guy should be eligible. We don't think he is eligible by NCAA rules, which they're right. He's not. He won't be. Because NCAA rules say that if you declare for the draft and you did not withdraw your name from the draft by the deadline, then you lose your future college eligibility. And that's what Bediako did in 2023. Put his name in the draft, kept his name in the draft, was not drafted, but that doesn't matter. He stayed in the draft, and that on its face makes him ineligible to play college sports again, according to the NCAA rules. And then the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, also chimed in and said, if you have signed professional contracts, or I'm sorry, NBA contracts, we're going to get into the difference between NBA basketball and professional basketball elsewhere in a moment, that you are also ineligible. And Charles Bediako signed, I believe, 3 different NBA contracts. Not the kind of contract that Steph Curry has or LeBron James has, but a 2-way deal, an Exhibit 10 deal that gives you the opportunity to bounce up and down between the G League and the NBA. He signed those contracts. He still never played in the NBA, but he signed those NBA contracts. And according to the NCAA, that also makes you ineligible. So on 2 points, the NCAA believes it's right, and that despite what the Tuscaloosa court said, Bediako's ineligible, according to its rules. And of course, that's the real issue here. What are the NCAA's rules on eligibility? Why do they apply one way in one situation and a different way in a different situation? Let's look at that issue. This is the issue, okay? This is the real issue here. And that phrase, arbitrary and inconsistent, was used by Charles Bediako's lawyer, Darren Heitner, in his complaint, the lawsuit against the NCAA. Not only are the rules themselves arbitrary and inconsistent when it comes to eligibility, but the way the NCAA enforces them is also arbitrary and inconsistent. And that's why you're looking at 3 gentlemen who are playing college basketball right now with very different backgrounds. And this is part of what Alabama, or I should say, Bediako's legal team is arguing. Baylor's James Naji, okay? He's from Nigeria, 7-foot center. He was drafted by the NBA a couple of years ago. Unlike Bediako, he was actually drafted. But also unlike Bediako, he never played college basketball before that. So we never put his name into the draft as an early entry. So these are apples and oranges in many cases, not exact duplicate comparisons. But the NCAA ruled at midseason that he could join the Baylor basketball team with 4 years of eligibility. And that is the case that really got this subject rolling and really got coaches rolling their eyes. Nate Oates himself a few weeks ago said it made him queasy. He's a former high school coach. He hates the idea of high school players losing opportunities because colleges are finding every way they can to bring in professional players with professional experience, like Texas A&M's Ruben Dominguez. On the Texas A&M Athletics website, under the basketball roster, under Dominguez's bio, it says he played 150 professional basketball games overseas. Let me repeat that for emphasis. 150 professional basketball games overseas. He's from Spain. He's an outstanding shooter. He's been a big part of this incredible run by Bucky McMillan and the Aggies as they continue to shock the world. They smoked Mississippi State last night. 150 professional basketball games. He was getting paid. A lot of guys in Europe. Kentucky has a guy from Europe. Auburn has a guy from the Adriatic Basketball Association, Filip Jovic, and he's just starting to show what he's capable of. Had a huge game last week against South Carolina for the Tigers. So he has played professional basketball for a few years overseas before coming to America. We need a sequel to that movie. Can Eddie Murphy do a sequel but focus it on college basketball, on players who grow up and play professionally from a very young age because they don't have the same high school system overseas that we do? So it's not as cut and dried high school to college to the pro ranks. They have guys that are playing professionally when they're of high school age. So it's a really difficult conundrum that the NCAA faces in trying to construct fair and balanced eligibility rules in the first place. What makes James Najee different from Charles Bediako? James Najee's played more professional games. Ruben Dominguez has played more professional games. Bediako's played about 46 games in the G League. These guys have played more professional games than he has. But again, the difference is he already has played college basketball. His eligibility clock, which again, until further notice, still exists, runs for 5 years. And coincidentally, and it just worked out so well for Alabama, this is the end of his 5-year clock this semester. So by that standard, he is eligible to play for Alabama if you just go by that standard. And the idea that a lot of Auburn fans have thrown out there, well, Stephen Pearl should just call up Chuma Okeke and Sharif Cooper and JT Thor, all guys who played for the Tigers before. They've all gone on to the pro ranks. The problem is they've all played NBA games. Bediako has not. And they are beyond their 5-year clock that started when they started playing for Auburn. So that wouldn't work. Sorry, Auburn fans. I appreciate your attempt to fight fire with fire, but in this case, put the fire out. It's not happening. The real issue here is, in terms of this case, in my mind, let's look at the bottom line. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because a local judge says you can doesn't mean you should. Just because a Tuscaloosa County Circuit Court judge issued a temporary restraining order that said Charles Bediako can play on Saturday night against Tennessee and the NCAA cannot punish Alabama for playing him doesn't mean Alabama should play him. This is a column I wrote that appears today. You can find it on al.com. You can subscribe to the Birmingham News, which is no longer a newspaper, but it is a daily online publication. It's a subscription publication. I think it's highly worth it. Shameless plug. Here's the headline on my column today. Hey, Bama and Greg Byrne, are a few more wins with Charles Bediako worth your reputation? Now, I know what a lot of you would say to that. Absolutely. I've already heard from Alabama fans who believe that way, that by whatever means necessary, if they can get Bediako in uniform and he can block a few shots and start a few fast breaks with outlet passes and throw down a few dunks when LeBaron Philon drives the lane and draws the defense, absolutely it's worth it. If Charles Bediako takes Alabama from a Sweet 16 team, which right now I would suggest that that's their ceiling with their current roster, if he takes them from a Sweet 16 team to a Final Four team, go for it. Do it. It doesn't matter if it's a friendly judge in your backyard that issues the ruling that makes it happen. It doesn't matter if the NCAA is hopping mad. It doesn't matter if Mark Pope and David Benedict and Dan Hurley, who put out, you have to give him credit for creativity, he put out a funny meme throwing shade at Alabama without naming Alabama, with a reference to the Rodney Dangerfield movie Old School, in which Rodney goes back to college at a very advanced age. Alabama folks, for the most part, don't seem to care about that. They can get their center back. They can get the center on the best team they've had since Nate Oates got there. They've had a lot of good teams. Not the most accomplished team. That team didn't get to the Final Four in 2023, but that was the most talented team. That was a team that could have, would have, should have won a national championship and didn't get past San Diego State in the Sweet 16 because they couldn't make a shot in the second half. So I will also say, though, that I have heard from Alabama people who are very, very ambivalent about this. It makes them queasy. It makes them think that they are crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. And that was a point that I made in my column today, and I do urge you to read it. There's a difference still between college sports and pro sports. There's a line of demarcation. Now, that line is thinner than ever. That line is thinner than Alabama's human pogo stick, Taylor Bull Bowen, standing sideways. But it's still a line. LeBaron Philon is a college basketball player. LeBron James is a professional basketball player. They're both getting paid to play basketball, but we understand the difference. And we appreciate the distinction. At least I do. And I think a lot of you do as well. Does Alabama want to be the program that erases that line? That completely blurs the distinction beyond recognition between college sports and pro sports? So that it's okay to play in the G League one week and the SEC the next? What's to stop a group of G League players from deciding, hey, you know what? We've got some college eligibility left. We're still within the 5-year window. Why don't we go play for one particular school and win a national championship? You could probably make more money in NIL and revenue sharing than you can in the G League. What's to stop a former college quarterback who puts his name in the NFL draft, doesn't get drafted, he's an undrafted free agent, he plays on a taxi squad for a year or two, and he decides, you know what? I'd like to go back and do what Fernando Mendoza did and lead a school like Indiana to a national championship. Where does it end? And here's the real issue. Time after time, year after year, coach after coach, athletic director after athletic director, president after college president, they all say the same thing. We want to know what the rules are. We need rules. We need rules that are applied consistently and fairly across the board. And then what do those coaches do? And it usually happens at the coach level. They do everything in their power to find ways around the rules. They look for every loophole. They leap into every gray area. They do everything they can to skirt the rules, to get an advantage. And I'll give Mark Pope credit, the Kentucky coach, when he was discussing this situation after his win over Texas, and he was suggesting that the NCAA should just, not count any wins that Alabama has with Bediako in the lineup, and therefore don't put him in the NCAA tournament. Pope's probably a little extra steamed because he lost to Alabama already this season without Bediako. But he did make a good point. He said the quiet part out loud. He admitted that coaches are the most competitive people on the planet, and they're all searching for an edge because that's what they're paid to do. They're paid to win. They're not paid to develop good citizens. They're not paid to educate players. They're not. Let's be honest. Forget the bonuses for graduation rates and whatever, APR scores. They're paid to win games, bottom line. And I suspect that if Mark Pope or Dan Hurley or a lot of other coaches were in the same position as Nate Oates and they had a guy the caliber of Charles Bediako who wanted to play one more semester for their team to make their team that much better, to take that team from a ceiling of Sweet 16 to perhaps a Final Four national championship ceiling, that they would do the same thing. I talked to someone in college athletics, texted with someone in college athletics earlier in the day, and they provided the real bottom line. We have met the enemy, and it is us. Meaning them. Meaning coaches, athletic directors, administrators. You say you want rules, and then you won't follow the rules. Or you try to change the rules, or you try to go get a court to go around the rules. That's where we are. We'll see where this goes from here, but that's my bottom line. Charles Bediako should not play a minute for Alabama basketball going forward. Nate Oates and Greg Byrne and Peter Moeller, the new president, they should do the right thing. They should say, it's not right, it's not within the rules, and we're not going to do it. Unfortunately, I don't believe that's where they're going. All right, that's going to do it for me for today. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is ScarboKnows. Thank you for watching on the Sidelines.live network. Thank you to executive producer Brendan Martin. Thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. And thank you to you especially for watching, for listening. Check us out on YouTube, Kevin Skarbinski-ScarboKnows, and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss an episode. All right, let's hear from our sponsor next. Thanks. See ya.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management. Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.